Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the incredible and, yeah, often turbulent story of a true rock and roll rebel.
hmm
The kind of figure who made serious waves asking that famously provocative question, why should the devil have all the good music?
We are diving deep into Larry Norman,
Mm-hmm.
a name you hear constantly called the father, or maybe grandfather
Uh-huh.
of Christian rock.
Right.
He just exploded onto the scene late 60s, early 70s, really challenging a church that back then saw rock music as,
Yeah.
well, basically demonic.
Yeah, it wasn't just like he was ignoring them. He was actively trying to redefine the whole thing, faith and music.
Exactly.
It feels less like just defiance and more like a strategic move almost, carving out this new, raw, kind of relevant sound. It didn't just shake things up, did it? It feels like it fundamentally shifted the whole conversation around what Christian music could even be.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
His whole approach was basically arguing that, great art and a spiritual message, they aren't mutually exclusive. That's the core idea in his early stuff. He dared to think God deserved the best music, even if it sounded like the devil's music to some people.
So, for this deep dive, what are we drawing on?
We've got a mix. Articles, bits from documentaries, some quite revealing conversations with people who knew him really well, and solid historical accounts of the genre.
Okay. So, our mission today is pretty ambitious then. We want to unpack his groundbreaking music stuff, his influence, how Christian rock even evolved because of him.
Right.
But we also need to tackle that significant discrepancy, you could call it.
Sure.
The gap that showed up between his music, his message, and his personal life.
Yeah, we'll definitely explore how those two very different sides are documented, the impact, on the people around him, and what it means for his legacy, which is complex, to say the least.
And just to give you a taste of his standing early on Billboard, compared his writing to Paul Simon.
Right. And George Martin, the Beatles producer.
Mhm.
He worked on Norman's album Only Visiting This Planet. That gives you a sense of his artistic credibility. But then, yeah, we have to get into the later chapters, the more turbulent stuff.
Okay, so to really get the impact Larry Norman had, we need to understand just how strongly traditional Christians opposed rock music back in the 50s and 60s. Why was it seen as such a huge threat?
Well, think about the typical church music then. The rhythms were often kind of smoothed out, right? Melodies more subdued, harmonies pretty restricted. It was meant to be controlled, restrained.
Okay.
Rock music, completely the opposite. You had those unruly, impassioned vocals, the super loud guitars, those jarring, hypnotic rhythms. It felt chaotic, uncontrolled.
And it wasn't just the sound, was it? It was the whole lifestyle attached.
Exactly. It embodied that sex, drugs, and rock and roll vibe,
Yeah.
which was seen as, completely against Christian values.
And there were flashpoints. I mean, Elvis, right? He sang gospel, but his stage stuff, highly controversial.
Definitely. Criticized widely.
And then John Lennon in 66 saying the Beatles were more popular than Jesus now. That just handed the critics ammunition on a plate.
Oh, absolutely. That quote basically became the justification for declaring war on rock. You can almost picture those record burnings in church parking lots. It was intense.
Wow. Quite a scene.
Yeah. And that's the climate Larry Norman walks into.
Yeah.
And he directly challenges it all with that question, why should the devil have all the good music?
It wasn't just a clever line then.
No, not at all. It was his core belief, his manifesto, really, that good music, any good music, could and should be used for God.
And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Started in a secular group, People.
Right.
Then drops his solo debut in 69, Upon This Rock, often called the first commercially released Jesus rock album.
That's the one.
His style was just so different, new, raw, relevant, like you said. And it clearly connected, influencing thousands, Christians and non-Christians. A massive statement, musically and spiritually.
He really did put his music where his mouth was. But, while Norman definitely kicked off this whole thing in a big way, he wasn't totally isolated. There were others kind of dipping their toes in.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, a bit earlier, you had the Crusaders in 66 with Make a Joyful Noise with drums and guitars. And Mind Garage in 67 did something called Electric Liturgy.
Oh, interesting.
And even earlier, 65, a 16-year-old named Isabel Baker put out a rockabilly praise album called I Like God's Style. So the seeds were there, kind of.
Okay. But Norman's impact seems more pivotal. And his connections, especially with Randy Stonehill, that seems really key,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely pivotal. That relationship is huge in the early story. Norman actually introduced Randy Stonehill to Jesus, literally in his kitchen in 1970.
Wow, is that true?
Yeah, Stonehill even wrote a song about it, Norman's Kitchen. Then Norman takes him under his wing, produces his first albums, Born Twice in '71, and the '76 album Welcome to Paradise, which is considered a genre classic.
So Norman wasn't just an artist, he was a mentor, a producer.
Definitely. He was shaping the sound, helping launch careers, really crucial in those early days.
And the genre kept growing, didn't it?
No.
Moving more towards the mainstream.
Yes, slowly but surely. By the late '70s, you had big names like Bob Dylan, even Arlo Guthrie, releasing Christian-themed albums.
Right, Dylan's Christian phase.
Exactly. Then came the harder rock stuff, Petra, Resurrection Band,
Yeah.
and then Stripers, remember them? Black and yellow spandex.
Oh, I remember Stripe, but they were actually on MTV, weren't they?
They were. Big deal in the '80s. And then Michael Knott starts pushing into alternative Christian rock in the late '80s, broadening the sound again.
So, okay, Christian rock is gaining ground, it's diversifying, getting MTV airplay. You'd think Larry Norman's story would just be this upward trajectory of success.
I would think so.
But ironically, it seems like as his influence grew publicly, these whispers started about a dichotomy, this big contrast between the music's message and his actual life.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's a documentary, Fallen Angel of the Outlaw, Larry Norman, that really tries to tackle these purposively two sides of him.
Okay.
He gets into the stories that started coming out about odd and controversial business practices, really difficult, broken personal relationships, and this tendency he apparently had to manipulate people who were really devoted to him.
Including artists he worked with.
Yeah. I mean, he had two ex-wives. He had major fallings out with close friends and artists he'd mentored, like the band Daniel Amos and Steve Scott.
And the split with Randy Stonehill. That one sounds particularly bad. Public and nasty. Lasted over 20 years.
It was really rough. A lot of it seemed to stem from Norman's control over artists on his label, Solid Rock. Issues around publishing, royalties, just heavy-handedness, people felt.
That sounds messy from a business perspective.
It was. But then there was the personal blow, which really complicated things. Norman married Stonehill's ex-wife, Sarah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That adds a whole other layer.
Hugely. It was a very painful split. It is important to say, though, they did reconcile eventually in 2001 after more than 2 decades, so there was some healing later on.
That's something, I guess. But then, after his death, another major controversy surfaced, didn't it?
Yes. The most significant one, really. The allegation from Jennifer Wallace, she was formerly McCallum, that Larry Norman was the father of her son, Daniel Robinson.
And this came out years later.
Yeah, the story is that the relationship happened during a tour of Russia back in '88, '89. But it became public much later, and for a really serious reason.
What was that?
Daniel, her son, was diagnosed with myoclonic epilepsy. And for his treatment, understanding his condition, they really needed his genetic history.
Ah, okay. Medical necessity.
Right. Jennifer apparently tried to contact Norman to get that information, couldn't reach him, or didn't get what she needed. So eventually, she went public with a story to CCM magazine.
And how did that play out? I mean, Norman's side, other people?
It got complicated and contested. There's an alleged email from Norman to Daniel, who was 16 at the time. In it, Norman apparently sort of admits paternity, implicitly anyway. But then he reportedly blamed Jennifer for making it public, and even mentioned brain damage from an old airplane accident in '78 as a reason for his, quote, weakness in giving in to what he called Jennifer's pushing.
That sounds deflective. What did Norman's family say?
Well, his brother, Charles Norman, initially dismissed the claims, called them suspicious, questioned the timeline Jennifer gave.
Okay, so pushback from the family.
But then on the other side, you had people like Sandy Stonehill, Randy Stonehill's wife, publicly backing Jennifer. She came right out and said Daniel is not a rumor.
Wow.
And she mentioned that key people knew about it. Concert promoters in Australia, like David Smallbone and Vic Campbell, apparently knew it was an open secret for years.
An open secret, that paints a different picture.
It really does. And Jennifer Wallace said her main motivation for finally going public was Daniel's distress. Apparently, finding out he wasn't included in Norman's will hit him really hard, tragically leading to suicidal thoughts. It just shows the real human cost of all these hidden complexities.
Yeah, absolutely devastating. It's just, wow. So you have this guy who basically starts the CCM industry.
Right, contemporary Christian music.
But he ends up having this really cynical view of the whole thing he helped create.
Very cynical. He felt CCM just became too safe, too suburb-friendly. He said it just offered safe versions of old fads in mainstream music.
Ouch.
Yeah, he felt it lacked real art or poetry or mystery. He basically called it propaganda.
Propaganda from the founder. That's harsh.
It is. His view was, look, all my songs are Christian songs because I'm a Christian. He didn't think you needed these obvious markers, these clues like mentioning the blood of the lamb for art to be Christian.
So authenticity over formulas.
Exactly. He even joked pretty bitingly that becoming a Christian in America just meant you had a broader selection of Christian CDs to choose from.
Wow, that's a pretty damning critique. If the guy who started it saw it as just, safe propaganda,
Yeah.
what does that say about the trade-offs maybe made along the way?
It definitely makes you think. And it ties into this bigger question of what Christian rock even is.
Mm-hmm.
Because the definition keeps shifting, right? Even people in the industry don't always agree.
How so?
Well, you've got bands who are very explicit. They state their beliefs clearly, use religious imagery. Think of bands like Servant, Third Day, Petra. They fit pretty neatly into that CCM box.
Okay, the overt ones.
Right. But then you have other artists whose faith is clearly a huge influence, but they aim for a wider audience. They often actively reject the Christian rock or CCM label.
Like U2, maybe.
Yeah.
Fauna talks about faith, but they're not a Christian band in that industry sense.
Exactly like U2. Or Switchfoot's another good example. Scott Stapp from Creed said it pretty directly once. I'm an artist who's a Christian because I don't write music to be evangelical.
So, different goals. Some are about ministry within a specific community. Others see faith informing their art for a broader audience.
Precisely. It shows you there are really different artistic aims, different ideas about evangelism, all happening under this loose umbrella. It's definitely a spectrum, not some neat category.
And we can't really talk about the genre taking off without mentioning the festivals, right? They seem crucial.
Oh, absolutely vital. Christian music festivals became these huge platforms, not just for the music, but for building community, for evangelism, too.
Explo 72 sounds like a big early one. Norman was there. And Johnny Cash.
Yeah, Explo 72 was massive. Norman and Cash on the same bill. Then you had Creation Festival, Ichthus Festival becoming institutions. Cornerstone Festival, too, though that one's gone now.
Right. So these festivals were really the places where the scene could gather and grow.
Definitely provided a physical space for it to thrive and connect with fans directly.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We're left with this incredibly complex legacy, aren't we?
Absolutely. Larry Norman,
Yeah.
the undeniable, profoundly influential pioneer, reshaped Christian music, brought rock and faith together like nobody before. But then the personal life, as we've discussed, just full of controversy, broken relationships, real darkness sometimes.
Yet his impact, musically at least, it still echoes, doesn't it? You mentioned mainstream artists admire him.
Yeah, people like Bono, John Mellencamp, Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Frank Black from the Pixies covered his song 666.
Wow, Frank Black.
Yep. And Frank Black famously called Norman the most Christ-like man I ever knew, which is quite a statement given everything else. So that admiration persisted despite the flaws, despite Norman kind of pulling away from the industry he basically built.
His story really forces you, I think, to look past the public image, doesn't it? To see the actual person, the human element in these larger-than-life figures.
Definitely. It really throws that tension into sharp relief.
Mm-hmm.
The powerful artistic message versus, personal integrity, and just the ongoing struggle of making quote-unquote Christian art in a commercial music world.
It does. And, there's that quote from Steve Sweetman reflecting on how the Bible itself doesn't shy away from the flaws, the sins of people God used. He says, God's grace extends to all of us who want to serve him, even to those whose lives show a dichotomy of sorts. If that's true, it makes you ask, what does Larry Norman's story really teach us?
Yeah, what does it teach us about grace?
Yeah.
About the power art can have, even when the artist is flawed, about that messy relationship between the message and the messenger.
It really leaves you wondering, how do you balance things? How do you, as Sweetman suggests, keep the bar raised high and call sin for what it is, but at the same time extend grace to the sinner, especially when you're looking back at someone who had such a massive cultural impact?
That's the question, isn't it? It's definitely something to chew on long after the music stops playing.